Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Who are my mentors, I believe, is the question today. And I thought about how I was going to do the video and what evidence I was going to use and what cuts I was going to put in. And I was like, no, that's not the point of why I'm doing Vader this time round. The point is the story, and I think that's becoming more evident to me as I think about how I'm going to approach each one of these. So, who is my mentor? I don't have one mentor currently. I have a couple, and I'll come to them at the end. But I think for me, my life has been about influences and who has been there at key points in my career that have influenced my life. And my notes thinking has been about my career and not my life in general. But I just wanted to kind of acknowledge those and just tell a few stories. So the first influencers that I have on my list are two women. Fraser, who was the stage manager at the Crucible Theatre when I was there on the stage management team. And she was the first person that made me realise that you don't have to have a fear of missing out. We talk about the fear of missing out a lot now, and there's even an acronym for it, which I can't think of off my head. But I always felt that I needed to be at the bar in the evening, and I needed to be at the social, and I needed to be at the opening night party, and I needed to be there, because if I wasn't being seen, then I didn't exist. And that can become very overwhelming for an introverted, extrovert kind of person. And Di just wasn't interested in being at those places. And not that she wasn't interested, she didn't need to be. And people asked her to be, but she would attend occasionally, and then most of the time she didn't. But the thing that struck me is about it didn't matter how many times she didn't turn up. To do her job, she still had the company's utmost respect, and it made no difference that she wasn't at a social, but she was there, present at work. And that was the reason why she was there, because we were working. And although theatre can be a very lifestyle experience, ultimately it is a job. And I think that was the first time I really started to come to terms with that. The second person on my list is a woman called Frances Rifkin. And Frances, or Fran, I have pleasure to call her my friend too now, after many, many years of knowing her. But she was a stage manager originally, but she then transitioned into being a director of small scale and workshop forum theatre. And her work is very much rooted in ethics. Utopia Arts is the company that she operates under. And as an activist within trade union, which is how I met her, she has been there. She's the sort of person who has the stories and anecdotes of when things happened. And those stories and how she tells those stories are just engaging every single time I hear them. I can listen to her retell her story of being a activist in the front line of the miners' strike in the 80s, where they were pushed around by the police and thrown in the back of riot vans, and recording as a practitioner and an observer and a theatre practitioner even then, recording, and actually those recordings being used as evidence in court when they were told that they were supposed to have been very riotous and offended people and swore at the police. And actually, and it's a fantastic story that she tells, and I love to hear her tell it, that she actually said, well, no, we didn't say that, because we know we said this, because, oh, by the way, did you know we'd recorded everything? And that was back in the 80s, and her oral tradition that's gone through storytelling has kind of come through to digital. But my love of storytelling and live theatre performance has kind of been embedded in that richness of experience. So Fran has been a huge influence on my life, and I still do. I now do the website for Utopia Arts, and I work with her annually to update that, and I love to find out what it is she's doing and what's happening next and what companies she's working with and which communities she's working with, and that's still a very important part of me going forward. Moving on to my next section of influencers, is a director I worked with in Century Theatre, and this is a director called Greg Doran, who at the time did not know until the end of that contract that he was going to be the associate director at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he has gone on to become the artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and it was a pleasure and a privilege to work with him at that stage in his career. And the reason he had such an influence on me is because I had propped a show as the technical producer, and he just wasn't quite happy with the way the lighting had gone, and he'd seen work that I'd done before the previous year, and he approached me one evening and asked me if I would consider relighting the season. And my first impression was, well, isn't the lighting designer going to have something to say about that? But he wanted me to do it, and it was the first time that someone had made me feel exceptional for the skills that I had, and I think that was a real moment where I realised that I was actually quite good at what I do, and it kind of stuck with me. Moving on to a bit further in my career, so we're now into sort of 2006, 2007, where I had been retrained as a web designer. I was looking at how theatre could be translated into digital, because I still had that desire to be part of the theatrical environment, but bringing new digital into it. And this practitioner, Marcus Romer, at the time was the artistic director of Pilot Theatre Company, and I had seen an article that he had written in The Stage about Second Life, and I had just been exploring Second Life 2006, 2007, really seeing the potential for artistic endeavour and a new space to explore. And there was already artists and musicians that I'd met in there, and I was starting to think, well, can theatre translate into this space? And there was a few theatre companies that were operating within Second Life, but I met Marcus after he had done his article about how his interest in Second Life was starting to peak, and live streaming. And we met at a conference and spent the rest of the conference talking about how digital isn't something that is more... Digital is not something that you just add on to theatre because it's new. You have to have the integrity in the thing itself, and then digital comes next. And it was him that said, don't add technology to the way you do things, change the way you do things once you know what technology can do. And that has been a fundamental premise of all of the work that I've done in theatre and in digital and in social media going forward. And it's kind of been that adage that just because something's new doesn't mean that it's better. So it was a huge influence on my progression, and part of that was, for a short time, being the virtual stage manager for Pilot Theatre in Second Life, and just having that year to explore and experiment with 3D buildings and 3D sets and what it would mean to use digital assets to add value. So we had the idea of creating the actor's hair or the actor's shoes or the actor's costumes, and we had little clickable points where you could listen to podcasts, and there was the idea of this making a 3D website. Unfortunately, it was very much before its time, and the entry curve into Second Life was just too big to kind of take it beyond that, and things moved on. But that was a huge influence in my life, and kind of brought me on to doing physical events that were engaged with social media. And also at that time I met Chris Hamley, and Chris Hamley was also a Second Life practitioner at the time, who'd done quite a lot of bits and pieces, and he had approached me to ask if I could do some, I guess, stage management for a event that he was doing, but in Second Life as the audio show caller, etc, etc. And from there he asked me to do a physical event, and from that physical event I ended up doing Media Camp Bucks. And it was at Media Camp Bucks that I think I met the people that have been the most influential in this current part of my life. And I think if I could have any mentors today, and I'm looking for new mentors, these are the people that I would love to start a mentorship kind of relationship with, and find people in the wider digital community. So if you think you might be that sort of person, or you know someone who might like to work with me, do send them my details. But those people are, Chris Hamley was hugely influential. And at the time, when I went to those first events, there was two practitioners, Phil Campbell and Christian Payne, who have both been huge influences on my life. And also coming out of that, two women in the digital sphere that I think of when I think of who I would really like to be mentored by. And one of those is Ava Pascoe, who's the founder of Cyber Salon, and Hannah Rudman, who is the Enviro Digital is her company, and she was the practitioner who brought me on board for the Ambition programme. I think she saw a talk about social media that I did at the Edinburgh Fringe, and she approached me afterwards in the audience, from the audience, and I got to work on that project. And I think I'm going to bring this to a close. I realised I haven't looked at the time. I've determined not to edit, so this is going to have to go up as it is. The people who now are my business mentors, and I think there is a separation when I thought about this Vader vlog about influencers and mentors, because I think there's a very specific role of a mentor, and the mentors that I have at the moment are very business technique skilling for me to move forward rather than developing and growing. They seem to be different, and one is Stuart Ross, and Stuart I have known for several years. I attended some workshops, and when I really needed to make a change and understand what it was that business needed to be, he was the person I reached out to and went, Stuart, I need to understand business. There's something I don't understand. I'm not really getting anywhere. Please, can we spend some time together? And any social media stuff that I have, you are more than welcome to. And he kindly obliged and spent quite a lot of last year very patiently trying to poke motivation of moving business and understanding what my pain points were that I could solve for people and what my value is. And I'm still not there, but I think part of this media making and this storytelling is part of me trying to understand it, that by putting it on video I somehow have said it and therefore it's out there, so maybe it will start a conversation. And finally, for my creativity, connecting with business, is a mentor called Philomena Rodriguez. And I met Philomena a couple of years ago as part of a mentoring programme. And she's kind of always been there on the periphery when I've needed to tap into that creative side of how my business can continue to be creative and my value as a creative. And she's helped me a lot to try and understand that. Saying that, considering there's all these fabulously amazing people, I'm still just as much as an undecided, irrelevant mess at the moment than I was probably 5 years ago. So I am trying, I am working forward, and that's it for today.